All right, well, this is exciting. Rod, a.k.a. Bright Light, hello.
Hello.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to meet you. I know, so I haven't seen you live, but so many of my friends said, you know, there were Mighty Hoopla and other events. Said, Steve, you must. It's great to have you here. I wondered, so your Pride playlist is here. You picked loads of great songs. Can we start with an extra one? Can we start with one of yours?
Oh, I would love that. That would be so nice.
Out of all of them,
yes.
Which one should we go for?
We're going to start with a track called Heart Slap, which features the Grammy-nominated Michael Kilgore, who's one of my best friends, incredible artist, has one of the best voices in the world, and I wrote it with John Shave, who's also worked on Charlie XCX's new album.
And how do you know all these influential people? It's interesting, Jake Shears was on Virgin Radio Pride a couple of years ago, and he alerted me to you first up. He said, you've simply got to, and he put one of your tracks on his Pride playlist.
Oh, thanks, Jake. I truly don't know. I think people just think I'm hilarious and keep me around, and then we end up working together. I don't know what it is.
Really?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of talent there as well.
Well, I'll take that.
How would you sum up your style? Because it's interesting, I was playing a couple of your tracks in the makeup room. I know it doesn't look like I'm wearing makeup, but they were like,
that's the power of good makeup though, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. But they said, it's amazing. It's like very, very retro, futuristic all at once, you know, kind of 80s tinged. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think I sort of wear my influences on my sleeve quite well. So I'm hugely influenced by 80s and 90s pop culture, especially films from that period of time. And I grew up, you know, as you'll see on my playlist, a lot of these artists were people that shaped me and shaped my musical taste. So I guess I'm sort of like a sort of from the school of George Michael pop, where it's like he pulled a lot from disco and funk and soul from the 80s and 70s, and I think I'm very much in that mindset of cherry picking references and trying to pay homage to the things that made me who I am.
And how was Mighty Hoopla?
It was amazing. It was so much fun.
You went down an absolute storm.
Yeah, it was a storm on actually the nicest weather day I've seen in London in maybe a decade.
Yeah, if you'd done it the day before, it would have been a different...
Yeah, no, we flew in and I was like, oh God. And then got to the site and it was just gorgeous. And I brought on stage Berry, who sang Sunshine After the Rain back in the 90s. Amazing. And we performed that together. I was just her backing dancer because she's on the new album, and we just had an absolute blast. All
right, so we'll start with your song. Just introduce this. It is...
Sure. This is Heart Slap featuring Michael Kilgore.
Okay, so you mentioned lots of these tracks have kind of shaped you as an artist, as a person. Erasure, A Little Respect.
Yes. I get very emotional when I talk about Erasure because I truly think that they are maybe the most important band or duo from the UK. I love these guys so much. I'm really good friends with them both, which is honestly one of the biggest honors of my life. I grew up listening to them, you know, passively on the radio and then actively as a fan. Probably Always in the 90s was the track that made me like a deep fan. I love that song so much. And I toured with them and became really good friends with them. Andy sang on my last record. I saw Vince in New York for coffee 3 weeks ago. They are the nicest people in the whole world. Actually, nice is a terrible word that makes them sound kind of like weak. They are the kindest people in the whole world. They are so talented. And Andy being out and proud, both as a gay man and HIV positive for so long, has been so monumental to people in the queer community. He has changed the landscape for so many people. Vince's production is just like, you know, unsurpassable for everything from like Depeche Mode, Yazoo, over here, I forget, I'm in America and they call it Yaz, incorrect. And the Erasure work, I think that they are two absolute pioneers of gorgeous pop music that breaks and mends your heart. And I think A Little Respect is a perfect song.
You know, it's really interesting. You mentioned about Andy Bell a moment ago and the fact that they were, well, however you want to say it, brave, fearless. But, you know, in the late 80s, to be out like Andy was. I remember we went on this show called Going Live here, and Philip Schofield said, what are you doing for Christmas? And he said, I'm spending it with my boyfriend. And this was in 1988. Yeah. I remember the tuts from my mum and stuff. I'm like, God, he's brave.
I know. Yeah, it's also very interesting to see now that Philip Schofield has come out, like what his reaction must have been like when Andy said that without even blinking back in the day. Andy has been so authentic and so genuine. I cannot thank him enough for being a person in the media, doing all of that and saying all of that without making a scene about it. It was just saying things naturally because they are, but nobody else was really doing that. Like, he deserves way more credit than he gets.
Now, next on your list is
George Michael with the amazing Outside. And truly, I could have picked so many of his songs, and I nearly picked Fast Love, which I think is a perfect pop song. But Outside, I think, is the best comeback from any scandal that has ever been done by any celebrity ever. The video with the spinning toilets and the sort of Tom of Finland police officer, amazing. The lyrics of Outside are so funny, you could catch fire. Like, it's just amazing as a queer anthem. I think George Michael has one of the best voices in the universe, and I cry a lot thinking about the fact that he's not with us anymore. It's so tragic. And especially when you see all the philanthropy that he did without telling anyone, you know, that came out after his death, and watching the Wham documentary. I always saw George Michael as this guy in the press that was just so, you know, just so normal, even though he was so fantastical, and his voice was just flawless, always. The songwriting was incredible. I obviously liked the earlier stuff and loved Wham, but when Older came out and I was in school as like an early teen, the Older album absolutely blew my world apart. Like, Jesus to a Child as the lead single from it was a crazy choice to me, but so wild and so like untouchably beautiful. Fast Love is just, oh my God, like, I can't cope with how good Fast Love is. It's perfect. I listen to that and I always think, like, how can I produce a song that sounds that good? And I can't, so I don't try. But he's amazing. Spinning the Wheel, amazing. That whole era for me of his was untouchable and just magic, you know, like watching a pop star come back after Wham, after Faith, after Listen Without Prejudice, and then deliver that. It was like, wow. And he was 34 or something like that.
Otherworldly, isn't it?
Otherworldly. Like, there's no one like him. It's just amazing. So, and obviously he's duetted with Elton John, who's one of my best friends, and another icon who I haven't included on this list, and he's going to kill me.
There's still time.
No, there's no time, because I can't take any of these off. But, I mean, Elton's a given, but I want to give George Michael his props because he absolutely is just the best singer, and Outside is a magnificent opus.
Rod's with me. Bright Light, Bright Light. Can I ask you about your upbringing? We're going to go into Sylvester now, but you grew up in... Tell me whereabouts you grew up.
I grew up between two villages in the Neath Valleys, so old coal mining landscapes, you know, very forgotten about by the delicious government that we have.
And I was watching the Pride movie. There's a documentary about the Pride movie, and it's really interesting to see some of the real excerpts from that time and the landscape, possibly before when you were growing up, but it seemed very, very tough, even tougher to live kind of out in the sticks, as it were, than in a city.
Well, I have, like, there's two bungalows opposite me, a farm, and then my house. So it's like there was no community around. You know, I had to get dropped off at school, and there's like a bus to town kind of thing. So it was very rural. And whilst on one hand that's gorgeous and very picturesque and kind of inspiring, it's very disconnected from community and culture, especially a queer community. So I definitely could not stay there.
How did you get by?
I listened to the radio and watched films a lot. And then as soon as I could, I learned how to drive, and, you know, was like seeing friends in Swansea and Neath. And we used to go to gay clubs, like desperately underage, please don't do this, in Swansea back in the day. And, you know, it was just like, it was scary and exciting. And things like, to the testament of British pop culture, things like Queer as Folk was a godsend for people like us at my age. Pop music was very camp, so at least there was that, and you could kind of hide the fact that you were gay by liking pop songs and bands like Deuce and, you know, Gina G, that kind of thing. Like, everyone liked it, but it was just so, like, outrageously camp. There were ways that you could sort of code yourself to be less obvious, but it was a really wild time to grow up. I think there was so much homophobia and so much prejudice, which is still there. It's lessened, but it's still there.
You think so?
Completely, yeah.
In what way?
Lessened or still there, which...
Still there.
Still there. I mean, just like things being called gay is bad, you know, like that slur is still going around. Like there's just no tolerance and there's no real visibility, or if there is visibility, it's kind of mocked. You know, I don't think it's easy to undo the codification of homophobia in culture. It's still rampant, and as much as things are changing, you know, it's progress is slow. So in Swansea, to my understanding, there are now no gay bars left.
Really?
No explicitly LGBTQ plus spaces. There are drag shows and there's a drag bar, but it's not a queer space, which to me is kind of bonkers. In one way, that's great because it's forward thinking and inclusive. But on the other hand, there is no actively queer owned space where you can go and know that if you just have a random night out and you want to meet some new queer people, you can do that.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up in Swansea, there were like 9 gay bars, and I worked at one of them. So for that to go to 9 to 0 while progress is happening is a little bit odd to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Let's get into Sylvester, a trailblazer.
Yes.
Many years ago. Tell me about him. Tell me about the song.
Sylvester's song, you know, I think a lot of people were introduced to this song by the Jimmy Somerville cover version, actually, or the Byron Stingley version, which was also a big top 10 hit, I think, in the 90s. And Sylvester's legacy is something that should be taught in schools. Just the way that he emerged out of like a gospel scene and suddenly became the forefront of like high energy disco movement, and brought people like Martha Wash to the world as his backing singer, and ended up having an international top 10 single with You Make Me Feel, which is really one of the most uplifting songs in the whole world. It sounds like, I don't believe in God, but this sounds like God to me, this song. It sounds like, I cannot believe that human beings wrote this song.
Yeah.
I can't believe that people arranged this song. It's like joy and affirmation and power. It's empowering. It is just like the most incredible track in the world. It's actually not my favorite of his songs, but I think it is the most pride forward, euphoric, uplifting anthem.
And just imagine being around on a night when this song first came out in New York City, you know?
I can't imagine. He's from San Francisco, actually. That's where he rose. I can't imagine being in San Francisco and hearing this for the first time. It was actually written as a gospel track, and then Patrick Cowley reinvented it as a disco track, which both of those things just so wild. And hearing it like this for the first time must have blown people's brains, because they're obviously on like God knows what drugs at the time as well. But hearing this in a club, I can't imagine how anyone stayed intact, you know, like it must have felt like the rapture.
By the way, quick question for you. How did you come up with that name?
Bright Light, Bright Light?
Yeah.
It's a quote from Gremlins, the film.
Right.
So there's a moment where Gizmo, the Mogwai, comes out of the box and the mother takes a Polaroid photo, not knowing that he's allergic to bright lights, and he just screams bright light, bright light. Please don't ask me how I arrived from that to that. I don't know, but
I love that.
My addled brain somehow made the connection.
It worked.
Yep.
Brilliant. Tell me about this next track.
So the next track I've picked is called I Know a Place by a trio called Muna, who are an American queer trio. This song, I think, is the most modern queer anthem that I can think of. It's such a, oh God, I get so emotional listening to the song. The message of like acceptance, self-acceptance and acceptance of others, and the lyrics like lay down your weapon is so arresting to me, especially living in America where guns are very prominent and queer spaces are challenged and threatened, and there's no real safety for the other, you know, in society. I think it's like, it sounds like a group embrace to me. It sounds like finding a community and them telling you that you belong. The vocals are just gorgeous on this track. The production is so transcendent, and the chants and everything. It feels like a national anthem to me. And for it to be such a recent song, I mean, actually it wasn't. It's probably 2016 now. It's a while ago. But it sounds to me like A Little Respect sounded back in the 80s. Right. I think it's an incredible call to arms for queer people to support and respect each other.
So you live in New York, don't you now?
I do.
So, big question then.
Yes.
Obviously, they've got their election later on this year.
Mm-hmm.
I returned to New York last year, first time after the pandemic. Didn't go out on the gay scene, but what's it like at the moment? Huge question for you.
Specifically on the gay scene or just in general?
Let's start with the scene.
I think that the queer scene in New York is amazing. Unlike London, where a lot of the queer spaces have closed, a lot have opened in New York, and there are lots of different neighborhoods. So these will mean nothing to you if you don't know New York, but you've got like Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen, East Village, West Village, NoHo, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Bushwick, Williamsburg, Park Slope, and Bed-Stuy, and each of these have queer communities, and each of them have at least 3 LGBTQ plus spaces, if not in the dozens. So there are so many more places you can go and find the type of music or person or community that you want, which is a very special facet of New York. I think that you can hop between them, or you can stay in your kind of like neighborhood and enjoy whatever type of queer experience that you want. There's a huge thriving like drag performance scene, music scene. There are tons of LGBTQ plus identifying like live music bands that that are emerging and very established. There's a huge cabaret scene. There's like giant clubs and lots of club nights that like uplift the community. So on that respect, I find New York incredible, and the possibility to create work and to have it supported there is amazing.
But what's the other bits like? You know, and socially, are things getting better? Has it improved? It seems very, very fractious, really. You know, over there.
Have things improved? No. Since I moved there in 2016 under Obama, I think things have taken quite the nosedive. Things are really fractured, and politics over there, as here, are extremely tense and divided. What I will say is that the community in New York has been amazing at rallying around and rallying against that. So the community has been very aware and very responsible to keep each other safe, I think. And a lot of like, not just LGBTQ plus people, but liberal-minded or caring or empathetic people, I think, have been amazing at looking after others and looking out for each other. So that's been heartening. But politics in general and the state of things in America is quite overwhelming. Virgin Radio.